Hello, my drunken Buddhas. Welcome. Today, I'm going to be taking you through a step-by-step guide to how to feel your feelings. Because almost no one in our society is taught how to feel our feelings. And there are real consequences to that, because when you aren't able to feel your feelings, they don't just disappear. They kind of get pushed down and repressed into your unconscious body and mind. And there they kind of wreak all sorts of havoc. You know, the consequences of not feeling your feelings could be almost anything and everything. So 99% of everyday triggers are from, past feelings that are stored in the body that get triggered up. Like when you get triggered by your family in particular, they're triggering up your feelings from childhood, or maybe your boss or co-workers or friends, partners, lovers, and so on. All those triggers, most of it's from past emotion. Or it can cause all sorts of, sort of mental issues, as racing thoughts, catastrophizing, projecting the worst possible scenarios, and even physical health issues like chronic pain, autoimmune disorders, kind of panic attacks, things like depression, anxiety. There's loads of different ways that these emotions can affect our lives when they're not allowed to sort of flow freely. And today we're going to be taking sort of a detailed look at what emotions are, what it means to feel an emotion, why we feel like unable to feel our feelings a lot of the time, and I'll take you through some key steps that will help you to discern and feel your feelings, because there's a lot to actually consider. So what is a feeling? It's a signal from your body that's trying to push you in the direction of meeting some need, right? So you recognize a feeling as that sort of physiological flush of some sort of intense energy of some sort or another. It's typically intense, doesn't have to be. Things like anger pushes you towards setting boundaries and defending yourself. Fear is a feeling that pushes you to run away from a threat, right? So you aren't going to be in any danger. Shame is something that kind of corrects your behavior. You feel ashamed, so you behave in different ways. It pushes you to behave in certain ways that will be accepted by the people around you, so you're not going to get thrown out of your tribe. And sadness, for example, signaling to you that there's some threat in your experience, and sort of its function seems to be to, or one of them is to help you to get help and support from the people around you. So these are super helpful and wonderful things, and they're a critical part of human life. And everyone is an emotional person without exception. So what does it mean to feel a feeling? This is when you are able to put your attention on that feeling and meet it directly without resistance. So you might feel like anger in the chest, for example, right? So it's like, if you imagine, you can just put your attention and meet that anger kind of directly without actually resisting it and letting it be just as it is. If you're able to do that, it tends to kind of unfold by itself, and what happens is it reintegrates itself back into your being. So it arises from you, it sort of signals and pushes you in the direction that it feels it needs to, and then if you meet it without resistance in that way, not intellectually but in your direct experience of feeling it with your attention, then it will eventually reintegrate back into your being. And you can tell that this has happened, that you felt a feeling, because you won't get triggered again. So say there was some circumstance and anger arose. So someone, insulted you, and there's anger arises to defend you, as it should. If you feel that anger without resistance and you allow it to move, maybe you express some anger to the person, and then afterwards you're sitting there and you're feeling that anger and just allowing it without resistance, it'll move away. And then if you think of that person again, you won't get triggered, you'll feel calm. Whereas if someone's in that situation, their anger comes up, they push it down, they sort of play, maybe they people please a little bit. There's some survival defense strategy comes in because didn't feel safe for them to express anger. Then that anger will get blocked, they'll get pushed back down, and then when they think of that person again later, they'll get triggered. It'll feel triggery. It'll feel unsafe again because that anger hasn't had a chance to complete itself. So that's how you can tell if you felt a feeling. You'll notice yourself feeling lighter. You get less triggered by things, right? Whereas if you aren't feeling your feelings, you tend to get heavier and heavier and heavier and more triggered. So what happens when we don't feel our feelings? We push them down and they get stored in our bodies in sort of as a kind of a readiness potential in the nervous system, in the muscles, in the tissues, in the fascia. And they get stuck there, and then they're kind of looping, looking out for an opportunity to get to come into action, to be triggered, so they can complete themselves, because they want to kind of complete their mission. And so they're still looping, watching out for these anything that could potentially be relevant to their mission. This is why, some people, they have a lot of repressed emotion. They're very anxious. They're very hyper vigilant, right? Even if they're in a room by themselves, they feel like they've got to, constantly be looking over their shoulder because they've got all these emotions looping in their unconscious, right? And then we keep on living from those emotions, right? So there was some threat 10 years ago that left an emotional imprint on us. We will keep living in the present moment as if that threat was still present. So we experience the present moment through the lens of the past because of these emotions that are kind of stuck in our body. And that's why you can feel very trapped or stuck or fearful or small, or all of these things when you shouldn't be, when there's no external reason why you should feel this way. It's because there's that weight of the past emotions. Now, there are very good reasons for why we feel unable to process and meet these feelings, right? So often in our childhood, we were never given the support we needed to feel our feelings, or we felt like it was unsafe to, in fact. Like if we expressed anger or sadness, maybe we would get shut down or ignored or something like that by our parents. And we had to maintain that attachment, that connection to our parents. So we sacrifice ourselves, we harm ourselves by cutting ourselves off from our feelings in order to maintain that attachment with the parents. And so there are two activities that come in to help us do this. One is resistance. We resist our feelings when they come up. We tense against them, we distract, we go into our heads. We could use some coping mechanism, alcohol or drugs, to sort of distract ourselves and numb ourselves out to that. We can dissociate. There's other emotions can come in that feel a little safer, like maybe shame comes in because we don't want to feel our anger, so we'll feel ashamed instead. We'll feel ashamed of our anger, or we feel guilty for feeling angry. These are ways of defending ourselves from that feeling of anger. There's also repression, which is when we unconsciously push that emotion down into our body in such a way that we don't even know that it's there. It never even arises. Right, so it's just like we just flat out don't even go there. And you may notice this, like for example, if there's some conflict at work, for example, right, and like for a split second it's like there's this anger, but it instantly, unconsciously, without even noticing, gets shut down, and like you pretend to be like calm, or maybe people please a little bit. You try and just sort the situation out, without ever letting on to yourself that you're angry. You're simply angry at the fact that the person did that or this, that, or the other. And this resistance and repression takes the form of beliefs and kind of certain physiological mechanisms. So the beliefs we take on, it's like it's unsafe to feel anger. We might, imagine you were small, you got angry, and your parents shut you down or ignored you. Then so it's like you get this belief: if I feel anger, I'm going to get ignored, and that's really threatening. So then you have that belief coupled with like tension in the chest, say, that's holding that anger down. You can feel it pushing down the anger. That's that kind of resistance repression mechanism, made up of beliefs and these sensations, these physiological mechanisms. So, with that little intro out of the way, let's get into the actual steps to feel your feelings. So the first one is to make sure that you're well resourced, because oftentimes these emotions are very intense and they were very threatening, and it can feel overwhelming to the nervous system to go there. You don't want to step into a whole bunch of anger or fear that's just going to overwhelm your nervous system and just traumatize you, essentially. So what you want to do is you want to increase your capacity to be with those emotions. You want to be able to contain them, so to speak. In trauma therapy, they talk about this window of tolerance, where there's a window within which it's possible to be present with your emotions and your feelings without being overwhelmed. And you want to develop that capacity. One way of doing this is what I call resourcing. I've got another video and a toolkit to help you to do that. I've got links in the description below. This is essentially building an island of safety in your experience. Or if you don't like the word safety, an island of support or of sort of groundedness. And it's sort of finding ways of getting into your body and experience in ways that feel neutral, pleasant, supportive, safe, that kind of thing. So you could maybe feel your feet on the ground. You could imagine your grandmother giving you a nice hug. You could imagine yourself on the beach. There's many ways that these are sort of pleasant ways in to feeling your sensations. And then you can start to increase your capacity to feel feelings, but by just touching on them bit by bit and getting more and more in touch with the body. In this way, you can kind of increase that capacity, so increase your containment and making sure you're well resourced so that you can start to feel these feelings. I didn't really like how that one went. I might redo that one. It's got to be a bit quicker. So the first one is making sure that you're well resourced and that you're actually able to contain any feelings or emotions that might come up. So being well resourced, in trauma therapy they talk a lot about this, fuck's sake. So the first one is being well resourced and being able to contain any emotions and feelings that might come up. In trauma therapy they talk a lot about this window of tolerance, which is this window of intensity where it's manageable to be with your feelings and you're not going to get overwhelmed. Because if you don't want to step straight into a whole bunch of rage and fear that's going to overwhelm your nervous system and traumatize you, it's not helpful. So you can start to get in touch with your body in ways that feel safer. So maybe you start by feeling your feet on the floor, or imagining being on a beach and seeing how that feels in your body, imagining being on your favorite beach. Or maybe you had, you've got a pet and you feel really nice when you're around them, and you stroke your pet and you feel how that feels in your body when you're with your pet, for example, right? And in this way, you're getting more and more in touch with your body, and you're actually increasing your capacity to be present with what's in your nervous system without getting overwhelmed. And over time, with different practices, you can actually increase that capacity more and more, such that you can sort of contain more and more of the feelings. So that's kind of the first step, making sure that safety and that containment is in place. And there's much more to say about that. It's a really important topic. More details are in other videos I've shot on resourcing specifically, which I'll put in the description below, and you can check out if you want to learn more. Then the second step is to discern the feeling. So maybe you feel the feeling already, or maybe you could invite it in, or maybe you could just sort of trigger it up a little by imagining someone or some scenario that sort of brings up that feeling in you. And be careful with that third one. You don't want it to be too intense if you don't have that capacity in place yet. But then you start to look within and start to just notice what is the actual feeling, because often we're so in our heads with feelings. It's like, I'm feeling anger, but it's like, okay, but exactly what are you feeling? Like, where are you feeling it? Is it big? Is it small? Is it like a tight ball? Is it kind of a cloudy fog? Does it have a particular color? Is it moving? Is it not moving? Does it feel kind of open? Does it feel kind of closed? All these sorts of questions are things you can start to ask yourself, right? What does it feel? Do I feel like it's okay for this to be here? Or does it feel like I'm resisting it? So you can ask these kinds of questions to start to discern exactly what it is. Not the label fear or anger, but that actual direct experience of the sensation in your body. Then the next part is we actually start to feel the feelings, right? So, I missed something. There's a question here sometimes that's, what if you don't really feel like you can feel anything? Like you try and invite in or trigger up emotions and there's not too much going on. Well, in that case, you may have some sort of defensive mechanisms that are in place that were really helpful to you when you were small to protect you from these intense emotions. And so it might take a little bit of slowness and gentleness before they start to emerge. But what you can do is you can almost start to notice that absence of feeling. So maybe you notice a slight nothingness or blankness or numbness or something like that. And you can start to just gently explore that and ask those same questions, just discern those, whatever feelings are in fact there. And this is a way of, again, getting more and more in touch with the body. And as you can also start to resource them, bringing a bit of safety to those locations, putting a hand on it, maybe swaying a little bit. Maybe those are just two examples. Maybe those might feel unsafe in some way. But I've got a whole list of different resourcing ideas in my toolkit, which I'll also link down below, so check that out. But if you're not feeling anything, don't worry. That's very, very normal. Just start to explore that feeling of not feeling in the same way. And eventually it will give way to some of the feelings beneath. Then the second step is, the third step, is to start to feel them straight up. So here we go, just diving straight in as you've discerned it, and then we're just gonna feel it. What we do here is that you imagine that your attention is like a finger, and that feeling is kind of like a pie, and you just kind of put your finger on the pie and leave it there. And just stay present, not trying to make it go away or change it, just opening up to it as best you can. Also kind of being curious about it, just investigating it with that finger of your attention. And this is how you sort of start to begin to feel the feelings. And there is a bit more to it. That's kind of that basic idea is sort of 80% of it, to be honest. You just be present with it. Keep your attention on it. You get distracted, you just come back. You're just letting it be exactly as it is. Now, the difficulty, I mentioned at the beginning that when you're feeling a feeling, we're feeling it most fully when there's no resistance. And almost always there's some kind of resistance to feeling our feelings. This is often because it feels unsafe or because there's something we've missed about it. There's some belief or memory or image attached to it that we haven't seen. It's wanting to show us something, to tell us something, and until we've seen that, it won't kind of break open fully. So we kind of start to listen to the feeling at this point. This is the fourth step. And we start to kind of dialogue with it. So you can ask it all kinds of questions that will elicit responses that will help you to understand it more and hopefully to open up a little bit more. And with these, you don't want to try and figure it out intellectually. You almost want to ask the sensation itself and kind of just stay open to whatever comes up naturally. If you get a really long-winded, intellectual-sounding answer, it's probably coming from your mind. Feelings tend to be, just answer with just a few words, a few simple words. So you can ask things like, why are you here? When were you created? If you had a voice, what would you say? Or just like, what's wrong? Or asking yourself about this feeling is like, who does this feeling remind me of? What does it remind me of a particular time in my life? And in this way, you can start to, or even just like, do you have something to tell me? Do you have a message? These kinds of things, you can start to unpack that feeling a little bit and get some of the content that's sort of hidden inside of there out, which is a really important step. And a lot of people don't know this, that you can in fact talk to your feelings in this way, and you'll get very helpful responses often. So a fifth step is to really start to embody the emotion. So say, you've been feeling it, you asked a few questions, maybe it's opening up a little bit more. Say it's this anger, and you've, maybe some images of, when you were a child come up and there's this anger in your chest. Now you really want to start to embody it. So often if we're just being with a feeling, it can be kind of a subtle resistance. And you can start to actually use your body to let that emotion express and move. So the anger, you might start just clenching your fists a little bit, maybe pressing your hands. And you can kind of staying really present. You can just feel your hands, feel that anger sort of being pushed through your arms almost. Or fear, maybe fear wants to like shake your legs out like that, or it wants to just kind of jump on the spot. Maybe you stand up and kind of jump on the spot to let some of that anxious energy out. Or maybe shame kind of wants to curl in like this. These emotions often they want to get you moving. The clue's in the word motion, right? Emotion. And so it can be really helpful to lean into these and start to allow them to move it or express, just merging with this part of you and just saying, what does it want to say? That anger wants to say, fuck you, fuck off, I fucking hate, this kind of thing. Or the sadness is like, it's not my fault, it's not my fault, it's not my fault. I didn't do anything. Just letting these parts express really authentically and honestly without a need to like justify or rationalize or minimize these parts of you, just letting them be just as they are. Now we get to the next stage, which is working with resistance. So I said there might be different parts, different layers of resistance. If you try to express anger, you might get some resistance to really expressing that, right? It's very normal. So a couple of ideas for, if you're resisting feelings is you can start at the edge. So rather than going straight into an emotion, you can put your hands just kind of either side of it, like you're kind of holding a beach ball. And you're just gently holding it and just staying present with it. Another idea is to pendulate. So we talked about resourcing in the beginning. You can, as you're feeling that feeling, you can go back to your resource. Say that was imagining yourself at the beach. You maybe just imagine yourself at the beach for a minute. Then you go back to the feeling of anxiety in the chest for a minute. And by going back and forth, you're slowly sort of training your nervous system to that it's kind of safe to be there. And you can also bring resources in, just using your hands to touch that part, certain breath work ideas, a little bit of movement, imagining, say you have a person, like a safety figure as your resource. Like I had one client once who used like Gandalf as their because he's really strong and kind. And she could kind of feel his strength and kindness with her. And you can kind of bring that to your feelings too to reduce the resistance. Another great idea is just allow the resistance. It's always a good idea to let these parts be as they are. So when resistance comes up, if you're resisting anger, say, you can just let it resist, let it tighten, let it be like, no, we're not going there, we're not going there, don't. Just letting it tighten and resist. And eventually by just holding it and just letting it be as it is, it eventually tends to relax. The same kind of goes for repression. These repressive mechanisms, the repressive mechanisms just tend to be subtler and deeper than sort of the surface level resistance. They're quite unconscious. And so you can sometimes need to kind of trigger them up by imagining how it would feel, for example, to get really angry at your parents or your boss or something. And then or imagine that you're just about to pick up the phone and get really angry at your parents or your boss. And then just feeling those parts of you come up to say, no, we can't do that. Right? You're bringing that unconscious repression mechanism up into consciousness. And then you can work with it in some of the ways I've kind of outlined already. So there you go. You build that resourcing, containment, making sure you're in a good spot, grounded. You start to discern the feeling. Where is it? What is it? How does it feel like? Then you start just feeling it, allowing it to be as it is, talking to it, asking these questions to discern why it's here and what it's doing, if it has a message, what it's afraid of, all these kinds of things. Then maybe starting to embody it or work with the resistance, however feels. Sometimes there might be a lot of resistance. You've got to work with that first, and then you can start to embody that emotion and allow it to move through. And then, afterwards, maybe, you manage to process some of it. You just want to bring yourself down, to spend some time just calming down your nerve, re-regulating your nervous system. And then you just keep doing that. And as you kind of, hopefully this is kind of like almost a new way of being with your emotions. Rather than pushing them down, going up into your head or having some coping mechanism, you can start to just get to know them better and better and get more and more comfortable with being with them. And then rather than just accumulating more and more repressed emotions through your life, you can just start to lighten your load as you're going through life. So I help people. I work with people one-on-one, giving somatic inquiry sessions to help them, uncover these feelings and to support them to feel them in a way that's safe and to process them so that those painful behaviors and life challenges they're experiencing can dissolve. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, just send me a note on my website. We can book a free chat and to see where you're at, and so I can outline a plan for how this work might be able to help you.